Contradiction. An introduction is to introduce people, but Christopher Robin and his friends who have already been introduced to you are now going to say goodbye. So this is the opposite. When we asked Pooh what the opposite of an introduction was, he said, "The what of a what?" which didn't help us as much as we had hoped. But luckily, Owl kept his head and told us that the opposite of an introduction, my dear Pooh, was a contradiction. And as he's very good at long words, I am sure that's what this is. Why we are having a contradiction is because last week, when Christopher Robin said to me, "What about that story you were going to tell me about what happened to Pooh?" when I happened to say very briefly, "What about 9 times 107? And when we had done that one, we had what about the cows going through a gate at 2 a minute, and there are 300 in the field, so how many are left after an hour and a half? We find these very exciting, and when we have been excited quite enough, we curl up and go to sleep. And Pooh, sitting wakeful a little longer in his chair by our window, thinks grand thoughts to himself about nothing, until he, too, closes his eyes and nods his head, and follows us on tiptoe into the forest. There still we have magic adventures more wonderful than any I have told you about. But now when we wake up in the morning, they are gone before we catch hold of them. How did the last one begin? One day, when Pooh was walking in the forest, there were 107 cows on a gate. No, you see, we have lost it. It is the best, I think. Well, here are some of the other ones, all that we shall remember now. But of course, it isn't really goodbye, because the forest will always be there, and anybody who is friendly with bears can find it. Chapter 1, in which a house is built at Pooh Corner for Eeyore. One day when Pooh Bear had nothing else to do, he thought he would do something, so he went round to Piglet's house to see what Piglet was doing. It was still snowing as he stumped over the white forest track, and he expected to find Piglet warming his toes in front of the fire, but to his surprise he saw that the door was open, and the more he looked inside, the more Piglet wasn't there. "He's out," said Pooh sadly. "That's what it is. He's not in. I shall have to go on a fast-thinking walk by myself. Bother." But first he thought that he would knock very loudly just to make quite sure, and while he waited for Piglet not to answer, he jumped up and down to keep warm, and a hum came suddenly into his head, which seemed to him a good hum, such as is hummed hopefully to others. "The more it snows, tiddly-pum, the more it goes, tiddly-pum, the more it goes, tiddly-pum, on snowing. And nobody knows, tiddly-pum, how cold my toes, tiddly-pum, how cold my toes, tiddly-pum, are growing." "So what I'll do," said Pooh, "is I'll do this. I'll just go home first and see what time is, and perhaps I'll put a muffler around my neck, and then I'll go and see Eeyore and sing it to him." He hurried back to his own house, and his mind was so busy on the way with the hum that he was getting ready for Eeyore that when he suddenly saw Piglet sitting in his best armchair, he could only stand there, rubbing his head and wondering whose house he was in. "Hello, Piglet," he said. "I thought you were out." "No," said Piglet, "it's you who were out, Pooh." "So it was," said Pooh. "I knew one of us was." He looked up at the clock, which had stopped at 5 minutes to 11 some weeks ago. "Nearly 11 o'clock," said Pooh happily. "You're just in time for a little smackerel of something." And he put his head in the cupboard. "And then we'll go out, Piglet, and sing my song to Eeyore." "Which song, Pooh?" "The one we're going to sing to Eeyore," explained Pooh. The clock was still saying 5 minutes to 11 when Pooh and Piglet set out on their way half an hour later. The wind had dropped, and the snow, tired of rushing round in circles trying to catch itself up, now floated gently down until it found a place on which to rest. And sometimes the place was Pooh's nose, and sometimes it wasn't. And in a little while Piglet was wearing a white muffler round his neck and feeling more snowy behind the ears than he had ever felt before. "Pooh," he said at last, and a little timidly, because he didn't want Pooh to think how he was giving in, "I was just wondering, how would it be if we went home now and practiced your song, and then sang it to Eeyore tomorrow, or the next day, when we happen to see him?" "That's a very good idea, Piglet," said Pooh. "We'll practice it now as we go along. But it's no good going home to practice it, because it's a special outdoor song which has to be sung in the snow." "Are you sure?" asked Piglet anxiously. "Well, you'll see, Piglet, when you listen, because this is how it begins. The more it snows, tiddly-pom." "Tiddly what?" said Piglet. "Pom," said Pooh. "I put it in that to make it more hummy. The more it goes, tiddly-pom, the more—" "Didn't you say it snows?" "Yes, but that was before. Before the tiddly-pom, it was a different tiddly-pom," said Pooh, feeling rather muddled now. "I'll sing it to you properly, and then you'll see." So he sang it again. "The more it snows, tiddly-pom, the more it goes, tiddly-pom, the more it goes, tiddly-pom, on snowing. And nobody knows, tiddly-pom, How cold my toes, Tiddly-Pom, how cold my toes, Tiddly-Pom, are growing. He sang it like that, which is the best way of singing it. And when he had finished, he waited for Piglet to say that of all the outdoor hums for snowy weather he had ever heard, this was the best. And after thinking that man out carefully, Piglet said, "Pooh," he said solemnly, "it isn't the toes so much as the ears." By this time they were getting near Eeyore's gloomy place, which was where he lived, as it was still very snowy behind Piglet's ears, and he was getting tired of it. They turned into a little pine wood and sat down on the gate which led into it. They were out of the snow now, but it was very cold, and to keep themselves warm, they sang Pooh's song right through 6 times, Piglet doing his Tiddly-Poms and Pooh doing the rest of it, and both of them thumping on the top of the gate with pieces of stick at the proper places. And in a little while they felt much warmer and were able to talk again. "I've been thinking," said Pooh, "and what I've been thinking is this. I have been thinking about Eeyore." "What about Eeyore?" "Well, poor Eeyore has no place to live." "Nor he has," said Piglet. "You have a house, Piglet, and I have a house, and they are very good houses. And Christopher Robin has a house, and Owl and King and Rabbit have houses, and even Rabbit's friends and relations have houses or something. But poor Eeyore has nothing. So what I've been thinking is, let's build him a house." "That," said Piglet, "is a grand idea. Where shall we build it?" "We will build it here," said Pooh, "just by this wood, out of the wind, because this is where I thought of it, and we will call this Pooh Corner, and we will build an Eeyore house with sticks at Pooh Corner for Eeyore." There was a heap of sticks on the other side of the wood. I saw them, lots and lots, all piled up. "Thank you, Piglet," said Pooh. "What you have said will be a great help to us, because if I could call this place Pooh and Piglet Corner, if Pooh Corner didn't sound better, which it does, being smaller and more like a corner. Come along." So they got down off the gate and went around to the other side of the wood to fetch the sticks. Christopher Robin had spent the morning indoors going to Africa and back, and he had just got off the boat and was wondering what it was like outside, when who should come knocking at the door but Eeyore. "Hello, Eeyore," said Christopher Robin as he opened the door and came out. "How are you?" "It's snowing still," said Eeyore gloomily. "So it is, and freezing." "Is it?" "Yes," said Eeyore. "However," he said, brightening up a little, "we haven't had an earthquake lately." "What's the matter, Eeyore?" "Nothing, Christopher Robin, nothing important. I suppose you haven't seen a house or whatnot anywhere about." "What sort of house?" "Just a house." "Who lives there?" "I do. At least I thought I did. But I suppose I don't. After all, we can't all have houses." "But Eeyore, I didn't know. I always thought—" "I don't know what it is, Christopher Robin, but what with all this snow and one thing and another, not to mention icicles and such like, it isn't so hot in my field about 3 o'clock in the morning, as some people think it is. It isn't close, if you know what I mean, not so as to be uncomfortable. It isn't stuffy. In fact, Christopher Robin," he went on in a loud whisper, "quite between ourselves and don't tell anybody, it's cold." "Oh, Eeyore, I said to myself the others will be sorry if I'm getting myself all cold. They haven't got brains, any of them, only great fluff that's flown into their heads by mistake and they don't think. But if it goes on snowing for another 6 weeks or so, one of them will begin to say to himself, Eeyore can't be so very much too hot at 3 o'clock in the morning, and then it will get about, and they'll be sorry." "Oh, Eeyore," said Christopher Robin, feeling very sorry already. "I don't mean you, Christopher Robin, you're different. So what it all comes to is that I build myself a house down by my little wood." "Did you really? How exciting!" "The really exciting part," said Eeyore in his most melancholy voice, "is that when I left it this morning it was there, and when I came back it wasn't. Not at all very natural, and it was only Eeyore's house, but still I just wondered." Christopher Robin didn't stop to wonder. He was already back in his house, putting on his waterproof hat, his waterproof boots, and his waterproof mackintosh as fast as he could. "We'll go and look for it at once," he called out to Eeyore. "Sometimes," said Eeyore, "when people have quite finished taking a person's house, there are 1 or 2 bits which they don't want and are rather glad for the person to take back, if you know what I mean. So I thought if we just went—" "Come on," said Christopher Robin, and off they hurried, and in a very little time they got to the corner of the field by the side of the pine wood where Eeyore's house wasn't any longer. "There," said Eeyore, "not a stick of it left, of course. I've still got all this snow to do what I like with. One mustn't complain." But Christopher Robin wasn't listening to Eeyore. He was listening to something else. "Can you hear it?" he asked. "What is it?" Somebody laughing. "Listen." They both listened, and they heard a deep, gruff voice saying in a singing voice that the more it snowed, the more it went on snowing, and a small, high voice tiddly-palming in between. "It's Pooh," said Christopher excitedly. "Possibly," said Eeyore. And Piglet, said Christopher Robin excitedly. Probably, said Eeyore. What we want is a trained bloodhound. The words of the song changed suddenly. We finished our house, sang the rough voice. Tiddly-Palm, sang the squeaky one. It's a beautiful house, Tiddly-Palm. I wish it were mine, Tiddly-Palm. Pooh, shouted Christopher Robin. The singers on the gate stopped suddenly. It's Christopher Robin, said Pooh eagerly. He's round by the place where we got all the sticks from, said Piglet. Come on, said Pooh. They climbed down their gate and hurried round the corner of the wood, Pooh making welcoming noises all the way. Why, here is Eeyore, said Pooh when he had finished hugging Christopher Robin, and he nudged Piglet, and Piglet nudged him, and they thought to themselves what a lovely surprise they had got ready. Hello, Eeyore. Same to you, Pooh Bear, and twice on Thursday, said Eeyore gloomily. Before Pooh could say, why Thursdays, Christopher Robin began to explain the sad story of Eeyore's lost house. Pooh and Piglet listened, and their eyes seemed to get bigger and bigger. Where did you say it was? Asked Pooh. Just here, said Eeyore. Made of sticks? Yes. Oh, said Piglet. What? Said Eeyore. I just said, oh, said Piglet nervously, and so as to seem quite at ease, he hummed Tiddly-Palm once or twice in a what shall we do now kind of way. You're sure it was a house, said Pooh. I mean, you're sure the house was just here? Of course I am, said Eeyore, and he murmured to himself, no brain at all, some of them. Why, what's the matter, Pooh? Asked Christopher Robin. Well, said Pooh, the fact is, said Pooh. Well, the fact is, said Pooh. You see, said Pooh, it's like this, said Pooh. And something seemed to tell him that he wasn't explaining very well, and he nudged Piglet again. It's like this, said Piglet quickly. Only warmer, he added after a deep thought. What's warmer? The other side of the wood, where Eeyore's house is. My house, said Eeyore. My house was here. No, said Piglet firmly, the other side of the wood. Because of being warmer, said Pooh. I ought to know. Come and look, said Piglet simply, and he led the way. There wouldn't be two houses, said Pooh, not so close together. They came round to the corner, and there was Eeyore's house, looking as comfy as anything. There you are, said Piglet. Inside as well as outside, said Pooh proudly. Eeyore went inside and came out again. It's a remarkable thing, he said. It is my house, and I built it where I said I did, so the wind must have blown it here, and the wind blew it right over the wood, and blew it down here, and here it is as good as ever. In fact, better in places. Much better, said Pooh and Piglet together. It just shows what can be done by taking a little trouble, said Eeyore. Do you see, Pooh? Do you see, Piglet? Brains first and then hard work. Look at it. That's the way to build a house, said Eeyore proudly. So they left him in it, and Christopher Robin went back to lunch with his friends Pooh and Piglet, and on the way they told him of the awful mistake they had made. And when he had finished laughing, they all sang the outdoor song for snowy weather, the rest of the way home, and Piglet, who was not quite sure of his voice, putting in the Tiddly-Palms again. And I know it seems easy, said Piglet to himself, but it isn't everyone who would do it. Chapter 2, in which Tigger comes to the forest and has breakfast. Winnie the Pooh woke up suddenly in the middle of the night and listened. Then he got out of bed and lit his candle and stumped across the room to see if anybody was trying to get into his honey cupboard, and they weren't. So he stumped back to bed again, blew out his candle, and got into bed. Then he heard the noise again. Is that you, Piglet? He said, but it wasn't. Come in, Christopher Robin, he said. But Christopher didn't. Tell me about it tomorrow, Eeyore, said Pooh sleepily. But the noise went on. Wah, 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 said whatever it was, and Pooh found that he wasn't asleep after all. What can it be, he thought. There are lots of noises in the forest, but this is a different one. It's a growl, and it isn't a purr, and it isn't a bark, and it isn't the noise you make before beginning a piece of poetry, but it's a noise of some kind made by a strange animal, and he's making it outside my door, so I shall get up and ask him not to do it. He got out of bed and opened his front door. Hello, said Pooh, in case there was anything outside. Hello, said whatever it was. Oh, said Pooh, hello, hello. Oh, there you are, said Pooh. Hello, hello, said the strange animal, wondering how long this was going on. Pooh was just going to say hello for the fourth time when he thought that it wouldn't. So he said, Who is it? Instead. Me, said a voice. Oh, said Pooh. Well, come here. So whatever it was came here, and in the light of the candle he and Pooh looked at each other. I'm Pooh, said Pooh. I'm Tigger, said Tigger. Oh, said Pooh, for he had never seen an animal like this before. Does Christopher Robin know about you? Of course he does, said Tigger. Well, said Pooh, it's middle of the night, which is a good time for going to sleep, and tomorrow morning we'll have some honey for breakfast. Do Tiggers like honey? They like everything, said Tigger cheerfully. Then if they like going to sleep on the floor, I'll go back to bed, said Pooh. We'll do things in the morning. Good night, and he got back into bed and went fast asleep, When he woke in the morning, the first thing he saw was Tigger, sitting in front of the glass and looking at himself. "Hello," said Pooh. "Hello," said Tigger. "I found somebody just like me. I thought I was the only one of them." Pooh got out of bed and began to explain what a looking-glass was, but just as he was getting to the interesting part, Tigger said, "Excuse me a moment, but there's something climbing up your table," and with one loud "Roar!" he jumped at the end of the tablecloth, pulled it into the ground, and wrapped himself up in it 3 times, rolled to the other end of the room, and after a terrible struggle got his head into the daylight again, and said cheerfully, "Have I won?" "That's my tablecloth," said Pooh as he began to unwind Tigger. "I wondered what it was," said Tigger. "It goes on the table, and you put things on it." "Then why didn't it try to bite me when I wasn't looking?" "I don't think it did," said Pooh. "It tried," said Tigger, "but I was too quick for it." Pooh put the cloth back on the table, and he put a large honey pot on the cloth, and they sat down to breakfast. As soon as they sat down, Tigger took a large mouthful of honey, and he looked up at the ceiling with his head on one side and made an exploring noises with his tongue, and considering noises, and what have we got here noises? And then he said in a very decided voice, "Tigers don't like honey." "Oh," said Pooh, and tried to make it sound sad and regretful. "I thought they liked everything." "Everything except honey," said Tigger. Pooh felt rather pleased about this, and said as soon as he had finished his own breakfast, he would take her round to Piglet's house, and Tigger could try some of Piglet's acorns. "Thank you, Pooh," said Tigger, "because acorns is really what Tiggers like best." So after breakfast they went round to see Piglet, and Pooh explained as they went to that Piglet was a very small animal who didn't like to bouncing, and asked Tigger not to be too bouncy just at first. And Tigger, who had been hiding behind trees and jumping out on Pooh's shadow when it wasn't looking, said that Tiggers were only bouncy before breakfast, and that as soon as they had a few acorns they became quiet and refined. So by and by they knocked at the door of Piglet's house. "Hello, Pooh," said Piglet. "Hello, Piglet, this is Tigger." "Oh, is it?" said Piglet, and he edged round to the other side of the table. "I thought Tiggers were smaller than that." "Not the big ones," said Tigger. "They like acorns," said Pooh, "so that's what we've come for, because poor Tigger hasn't had any breakfast yet." Piglet pushed the bowl of acorns toward Tigger and said, "Help yourself," and then he got as close up to Pooh and felt much braver and said, "So you're Tigger? Well, well," in a careless sort of way. But Tigger said nothing, because his mouth was full of acorns. After a long munching voice, he said, "Ears, only I acorns." And when Pooh and Piglet said, "What?" he said, "Scusi," and went outside for a moment. When he came back, he said firmly, "Tiggers don't like acorns." "But you said they liked everything except honey," said Pooh. "Everything except honey and acorns," explained Tigger. When he heard this, Pooh said, "Oh, I see," and Piglet, who was rather glad that Tigger didn't like acorns, said, "What about thistles?" "Thistles," said Tigger, "is what Tiggers like best." "Then let's go along and see Eeyore," said Piglet. So the 3 of them went, and after they had walked and walked and walked, they came to the part of the forest where Eeyore was. "Hello, Eeyore," said Pooh, "this is Tigger." "What is?" said Eeyore. "This," explained Pooh and Piglet together, and Tigger smiled his happiest smile and said nothing. Eeyore walked all around Tigger one way, and then turned and walked all around in the other way. "What did you say it was?" he asked. "Tigger." "Ah," said Eeyore. "He's just come," explained Piglet. "Ah," said Eeyore again, when he thought for a long time and said, "When is he going?" Pooh explained to Eeyore that Tigger was a great friend of Christopher Robin's, who had come to stay in the forest, and Piglet explained to Tigger that he mustn't mind what Eeyore said because he was always gloomy, and Eeyore explained to Piglet that, on the contrary, he was feeling particularly cheerful this morning, and Tigger explained to anybody who was listening that he hadn't had any breakfast yet. "I knew there was something," said Pooh. "Tiggers always eat thistles, so that's why we came to you, Eeyore." "Don't mention it, Pooh." "Oh, Eeyore, I didn't mean that. I didn't want to see you. Quite. But your new stripy friend, naturally he wants breakfast. What did you say his name was?" "Tigger." "Then come this way, Tigger." Eeyore led the way to the most sizzling-looking patch of thistles that ever was, and waved a hoof at it. "A little patch I was keeping for my birthday," he said, "but, after all, what are birthdays? Here today and gone tomorrow. Help yourself, Eeyore, Tigger." Tigger thanked him and looked a little anxiously at Pooh. "Are these really thistles?" he whispered. "Yes," said Pooh. "What Tiggers like best?" "That's right," said Pooh. "I see," said Tigger. So he took a large mouthful and gave a large crunch. "Ow!" said Tigger. He sat down and put his paw in his mouth. "What's the matter?" asked Pooh. "Hot," mumbled Tigger. "Your friend," said Eeyore, "appears to have bitten on a bee." Pooh's friend stopped shaking his head to get the prickles out, and explained that Tiggers don't like thistles. "Then why bend a perfectly good one?" said Eeyore. "But you said," began Pooh, "that you said that Tiggers like everything except honey and acorns." "And thistles," said Tigger, who was now running around in circles with his tongue hanging out. Pooh looked at him sadly. "What are we going to do?" he asked Piglet. Piglet knew the answer to that, and he said at once that they must go and see Christopher Rabbit. "You'll find him with Kanga," said Eeyore. He came close to Pooh and said in a loud whisper, "Could you ask your friend to do his exercises somewhere else? I shall be having lunch directly, and I don't want it bounced on before I begin. A trifling matter and fussy of me, but we all have our little ways." Pooh nodded solemnly and called to Tigger, "Come along and we'll see Kanga. She's sure to have lots of breakfast for you." Tigger finished his last circle and came up to Pooh and Piglet. "Hot," he explained with a large and friendly smile. "Come on," he rushed off. Pooh and Piglet walked slowly after him, and as they walked, Piglet said nothing, because he couldn't think of anything, and Pooh said nothing, because he was thinking of a poem. And when he had thought of it, he began, "What shall we do about poor little Tigger? If he never eats nothing, he'll never get bigger. He doesn't like honey and acorns and thistles because of the taste and because of the bristles, and all the good things which an animal likes have the wrong sort of swallow or too many spikes." "He's quite big enough anyhow," said Piglet. "He isn't really very big." "Well, he seems so." Pooh was thoughtful when he heard this, and then he murmured to himself, "But whatever his weight in pounds, shillings, and ounces, he always seems bigger because of his bounces." "And that's the whole poem," he said. "Do you like it, Piglet?" "All except the shillings," said Piglet. "I don't think they ought to be there." "They wanted to come in after the pounds," explained Pooh, "so I let them. It is the best way to write poetry, letting things come." "Oh, I didn't know," said Piglet. Tigger had been bouncing in front of them all this time, turning round every now and then to ask, "Is this the way?" And now, at last, they came in sight of Kanga's house, and there was Christopher Robin. Tigger rushed up to him. "Oh, there you are, Tigger," said Christopher Robin. "I knew you'd be somewhere." "I've been finding things in the forest," said Tigger importantly. "I found a Pooh and a Piglet and an Eeyore, but I can't find any breakfast." Pooh and Piglet came up and hugged Christopher Robin, and they explained what had been happening. "Don't you know what Tigger's like?" asked Pooh. "I expect if I thought very hard I should," said Christopher Robin, "but I thought Tigger knew." "I do," said Tigger. "Everything there is in the world except honey and acorns and—" "What were those hot things called?" "Thistles." "Yes, and those." "Oh, well then, Kanga can give you some breakfast." So they went into Kanga's house, and when Roo had said, "Hello, Pooh," and "Hello, Piglet" once, and "Hello, Tigger" twice, because he had never said it before and it sounded funny, they told Kanga what they wanted, and Kanga said very kindly, "Well, look in the cupboard, Tigger dear, and see what you like," because she knew at once that however big Tigger seemed to be, he wanted as much kindness as Roo. "Shall I look too?" said Pooh, who was beginning to feel a little 11 o'clockish, and he found a small tin of condensed milk and something that seemed to tell him that Tigger didn't like this, so he took it into a corner by himself and went with it to see that nobody interrupted it. But the more Tigger put his nose into this and his paw into that, the more things he found which Tigger didn't like, and when he had found everything in the cupboard and couldn't eat any of it, he said to Kanga, "What happens now?" But Kanga and Christopher Robin and Piglet were all standing round Roo, watching him have his extract of malt, and Roo was saying, "Must I?" and Kanga was saying, "Now, Roo dear, you remember what you promised." "What is it?" whispered Tigger to Piglet. "His strengthening medicine," said Piglet. "He hates it." So Tigger came closer, and he leant over the back of Roo's chair, and suddenly he put his tongue and took one large glop, and with a sudden jump of surprise, Kanga said, "Oh," and then clutched at the spoon again just as it was disappearing, and pulled it safely back out of Tigger's mouth, but the extract of malt had gone. "Tigger dear," said Kanga, "he's taken my medicine, he's taken my medicine, he's taken my medicine," saying happily, thinking it was a tremendous joke. Then Tigger looked up at the ceiling and closed his eyes, and his tongue went round and round inside his chops, in case he had left any outside, and a peaceful smile came over his face as he said, "So that's what Tigger's like." Which explains why he always lived at Kanga's house afterward and had extract of malt for breakfast, dinner, and tea. And sometimes, when Kanga thought he wanted strengthening, he had a spoonful or two of Roo's breakfast after meals as medicine. "But I think," said Piglet to Pooh, "that he's been strengthened quite enough." Chapter 3, in which a search is organdized, and Piglet nearly meets the Heffalump again. Pooh was sitting in his house one day counting his pots of honey when there came a knock on the door. 14, said Pooh. Come in. 14. Or was it 15? Bother, that's muddled me. Hello, Pooh, said Rabbit. Hello, Rabbit. 14, wasn't it? What was? My pots of honey, what I was counting. 14, that's right. Are you sure? No, said Rabbit. Doesn't matter. I just like to know, said Pooh humbly, so as I can say to myself, I've got 14 pots of honey left, or 15, as the case may be. It's sort of comforting. Well, let's call it 16, said Rabbit. What I came to say was, have you seen Small anywhere about? I don't think so, said Pooh. And then, after thinking a little more, he said, Who is Small? One of my friends and relations, said Rabbit carelessly. This didn't help Pooh much, because Rabbit had so many friends and relations, and of such different sorts and sizes, that he didn't know whether he ought to be looking for Small at the top of an oak tree, or in the bundle of a buttercup. I haven't seen anybody today, said Pooh, not so as to say, Hello, Small, too. Did you want him for anything? I don't want him, said Rabbit. But it's always useful to know where a friend and relation is, whether you want him or whether you don't. Oh, I see, said Pooh. Is he lost? Well, said Rabbit, nobody has seen him for a long time, so I suppose he is. Anyhow, he went on importantly, I promised Christopher Robin I'd organize a search for him, so come on. Pooh said goodbye affectionately to his 14 pots of honey and hoped they were 15, and he and Rabbit went out into the forest. Now, said Rabbit, this is a search, and I have organized it. Done what to it, said Pooh? Organize it, which means, well, it's what you do to a search when you don't all look in the same place at once. So I want you, Pooh, to search by the 6 pine trees first, and then work your way towards Owl's house, and look out for me there. Do you see? No, said Pooh. What? Then I'll see you at Owl's house in about an hour's time. Is Piglet Organdized too? We all are, said Rabbit, and off he went. As soon as Rabbit was out of sight, Pooh remembered that he had forgotten to ask who Small was, and whether he was the sort of friend and relation who settled on one's nose, or the sort who got trodden on by mistake, and as it was too late now, he thought he would begin the hunt by looking for Piglet and asking him what they were looking for before he looked for it. And it's no good looking at the 6 pine trees for Piglet, said Pooh to himself, because he's been organized in a special place of his own, so I shall have to look for the special place first. I wonder where it is. And he wrote it down in his head like this. Order of looking for things. Number 1, special place, to find Piglet. 2, Piglet, to find who Small is. 3, Small, to find Small. 4, Rabbit, to tell him I've found Small. 5, Small again, to tell him I've found Rabbit. Which makes it look like a bothering sort of day, thought Pooh as he stumbled along. The next moment the day became very bothering indeed, because Pooh was so busy not looking where he was going that he stepped on a piece of the forest which had been left out by mistake, and he only had time to think to himself, I'm flying. What Owl does. I wonder how you stop when he stopped. Bump. Ow! Squeaked something. That's funny, thought Pooh. I said ow without really oohing. Help! Said a high, small voice. That's me again, thought Pooh. I've had an accident and fallen down in a well, and my voice has gone all squeaky and worse before I'm ready for it, because I've done something to myself inside. Bother. Help! Help! There you are. I say things when I'm not trying, so it must be a very bad accident. And then he thought that perhaps when he did try to say things he wouldn't be able to. So to make sure, he said loudly, A very bad accident to Pooh Bear. Pooh, squeaked the voice. It's Piglet, cried Pooh eagerly. Where are you? Underneath, said Piglet in an underneath sort of way. Underneath what? You, squeaked Piglet. Get up. Oh, said Pooh, scrambling up as quickly as he could. Did I fall on you, Piglet? You fell on me, said Piglet, feeling himself all over. I didn't mean to, said Pooh sorrowfully. I didn't mean to be underneath, said Piglet sadly, but I'm all right, Pooh. And I am so glad it was you. What's happened, said Pooh. Where are we? I think we're in a sort of pit. I was walking along looking for somebody, and then suddenly it wasn't any more. And just when I got up to see where I was, something fell on me, and it was you. So it was, said Pooh. Yes, said Piglet. Pooh, he went on nervously and came a little closer. Do you think we're in a trap? Pooh hadn't thought about it at all, and now he nodded. For suddenly he remembered how he and Piglet had once made a Pooh trap for Heffalumps, and he guessed what had happened. He and Piglet had fallen into a Heffalump trap for Poohs. That's what it was. What happens when the Heffalump comes, said Piglet tremblingly, when he had heard the news. Perhaps he won't notice you, Piglet, said Pooh encouragingly, because you're a very small animal. But he'll notice you, Pooh. He'll notice me, and I shall notice him, said Pooh, thinking it out. We'll notice each other for a long time, and then he'll say, Ho, ho! Piglet shivered a little at the thought of that ho, ho, and his ears began to twitch. What will you say?" he asked. Pooh tried to think of something he would say, but the more he thought, the more he felt that there is no real answer to "ho ho," said by a Heffalump in the sort of voice that Heffalump was going to say it in. "I shan't say anything," said Pooh at last. "I shall just hum to myself as if I was waiting for something." "Then perhaps he'll say 'ho ho' again," suggested Piglet anxiously. "He will," said Pooh. Piglet's ears twitched so quickly that he had to lean them against the side of the trap to keep them quiet. "He will say it again," said Pooh, "and I shall go on humming, and that will upset him, because when you say 'ho ho' twice in a gloating sort of way, and the other person only hums, you suddenly find, just as you begin to say it the third time, that, well, you find—" "What?" "That it isn't," said Pooh. "Isn't what?" Pooh knew what he meant, but being a very little brain, he couldn't think of the words. "Well, it just isn't," he said. "You mean it isn't ho-ho-ish anymore?" said Piglet hopefully. Pooh looked at him admiringly and said that was what he meant. If you went on humming all the time, because you couldn't go on saying ho-ho forever. "But he'll say something else," said Piglet. "That's just it. He'll say, 'What's all this?' And then I shall say, and this is a very good idea, Piglet, which I've just thought of, I shall say, 'It's a trap for a Heffalump which I've made, and I'm waiting for the Heffalump to fall in.' And then I shall go on humming. That will unsettle him." "Pooh!" cried Piglet, and now it was his turn to be the admiring one. "You've saved us!" "Have I?" said Pooh, not feeling quite sure. But Piglet was quite sure, and his mind ran on, and he saw Pooh and the Heffalump talking to each other. And he thought suddenly and a little sadly that it would have been rather nice if it had been Pooh and the Heffalump talking so grandly to each other, and not Pooh, as much as he loved Pooh, because he had really had more brain than Pooh. And the conversation would go better if he and not Pooh were doing it on one side of it. And he would be comforting afterwards in the evenings to look back on the day when he had answered a Heffalump back as bravely as if the Heffalump wasn't there. It seemed so easy now, he knew just what he would say. Heffalump, gloatingly, "Ho ho!" Piglet, carelessly, "Tra-la-la-la, tra-la-la-la-la." Heffalump, surprised and not quite so sure of himself, "Ho ho!" Piglet, more carelessly still, "Tiddlum-tum, tiddlum-tum." Heffalump, beginning to say ho ho and turning it awkwardly into a cough. What's all this?" Piglet, surprised, "Hello, this is a trap I've made, and I'm waiting for a Heffalump to fall into it." Heffalump, greatly disappointed, "Oh." After a long silence, "Are you sure?" Piglet, "Yes." Heffalump, "Oh," nervously, I thought it was a trap I'd made to catch piglets." Piglet, surprised, "Oh, no." Heffalump, "Oh," apologetically, I must have got it wrong then." Piglet, "I'm afraid so," politely, "I'm sorry." He goes on humming. Heffalump, Well, I suppose I'd better be getting back." Piglet, looking up carelessly, "Must you? Well, if you see Christopher Robin anywhere, you might tell him I want him." Heffalump, eager to please, Certainly, he hurries off. Pooh, who wasn't going to be there, but we found we can't do without him. "Oh, Piglet, how brave and clever you are." Piglet, modestly, "Not at all, Pooh. And then when Christopher Robin comes, Pooh can tell him all about it." While Piglet was dreaming this happy dream, and Pooh was wondering again whether it was 14 or 15, the search for Small was still going on all over the forest. Small's real name was Very Small Beetle, but he was called Small for short when he was spoken to at all, which hardly ever happened except when somebody said, "Really Small." He had been staying with Christopher Robin for a few seconds, and then he started round a gorse bush for exercise, but instead of coming back the other way as expected, he hadn't, so nobody knew where he was. "I suspect he's just gone home," said Christopher Robin to Rabbit. "Did he say goodbye and thank you for a nice time?" said Rabbit. "He only just said how do you do," said Christopher Robin. "Ha," said Rabbit. After thinking a little, he went on, "Has he written a letter saying how much he enjoyed himself and how sorry he was he had to go so suddenly?" Christopher Robin didn't think he had. "Ha," said Rabbit again, and looked very important. "This is serious. He is lost. We must begin the search at once." Christopher Robin, who was thinking of something else, said, "Where's Pooh?" But Rabbit had gone. So he went to his house and drew a picture of Pooh going on a long walk at about 7 o'clock in the morning. And then he climbed to the top of his tree and climbed down again. And then he wondered what Pooh was doing and went across the forest to see. It was not long before he came to the gravel pit. And he looked down, and there were Pooh and Piglet with their backs to him, grinning happily. "Ho, ho," said Christopher Robin loudly and suddenly. Piglet jumped 6 inches in the air with surprise and anxiety, but Pooh went on dreaming. "It's the Heffalump," thought Piglet nervously. "Now then," he hummed in his throat a little so that none of the words should stick. And then In the most delightfully easy way, he said, "Tra-la-la, tra-la-la," as if he had just thought of it. But he didn't look round, because if you look round and see a very fierce Heffalump looking down at you, sometimes you forget what you were going to say. "Rum-tum-tum, tiddlum," said Christopher Robin in a voice like Pooh's, because Pooh had at once invented a song which went, "Tra-la-la, tra-la-la, 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 rum-tum-tum, tiddlum." So whenever Christopher Robin sings it, he always sings it in a Pooh voice, which seems to suit it better. He said the wrong thing, thought Piglet anxiously. He ought to have said ho-ho again. Perhaps I had better say it for him. And as fiercely as he could, Piglet said ho-ho. "How did you get there, Piglet?" said Christopher Robin in his ordinary voice. "This is terrible," thought Piglet. "First he talks in Pooh's voice, and then he talks in Christopher Robin's voice. And he's doing it so as to unsettle me." And being now completely unsettled, he said very quickly and swiftly, "This is a trap for Pooh's, and I'm waiting to fall in it. Ho-ho, what's all this?" And then I say ho-ho again. "What?" said Christopher Robin. "A trap for ho-ho," said Piglet huskily. "I've just made it, and I'm waiting for the ho-ho to come. How long Piglet would have gone on like this, I don't know. But at that moment, Pooh woke up suddenly and decided that it was 16. So he got up, and as he turned his head so as to see himself in that awkward place in the middle of his back where something was tickling him, he saw Christopher Robin. "Hello," he shouted joyfully. "Hello, Pooh." Piglet looked up and looked away again, and he felt so foolish and uncomfortable that he almost decided to run away to the sea and be a sailor when he suddenly saw something. "Pooh," he cried, "there's something climbing up your back." "I thought there was," said Pooh. "It's small," said Piglet. "Oh, that's who it is it?" said Pooh. "Christopher Robin, I found Small," cried Piglet. "Well done, Piglet," said Christopher Robin, and at these encouraging words, Piglet felt quite happy again and decided not to be a sailor after all. So when Christopher Robin had helped them out of the gravel pit, they all went off together hand in hand. And 2 days later, Rabbit happened to meet Eeyore in the forest. "Hello, Eeyore," he said. "What are you looking for?" "Small, of course," said Eeyore. "Haven't you any brain?" "Oh, but didn't I tell you?" said Rabbit. "Small was found 2 days ago." There was a moment's silence. "Ha ha," said Eeyore bitterly. "Merry Mitten, what not, don't apologize. It's just what would happen."